All right, good evening, everyone.
Good
Can we all
evening.
hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
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 sir.
all right. So we'll be starting very soon, or we'll be starting right about now. So I will just be commencing this session. I'm not the one who is supposed to moderate this particular class. Our moderator is having a little issues joining in, but I'm sure very soon he will be joining in. But all the same, welcome to week two of our JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program. My name is Dennis Williams. Our topic for today is artificial intelligence, governance, and ethics, and the European Union Act. Right. So going straight into the business of today, I will just be reading our mentors profile. That is the mentors we are expecting on or in this particular class. So starting first with Mr. Gabriel Udo. Gabriel is a research fellow at the Robotics and Artificial Intelligence Law Society, Reus Berlin, with a strong passion for the intersection of AI law, ethics, and society. Also, he is a PhD candidate at the European University Vadrina, focusing on the law and ethics of autonomous weapon systems. His expertise spans topics like robotics, smart city technologies, digital colonization, and privacy. He is also proficient in Python programming and data analytics. Mr. Gabriel is not yet here with us, but I'm sure he'll be joining us shortly. Um, our second mentor that we're expecting on this class is Magdalena Koning. I can see her here with us. Thank you, Ma, for joining. We are happy to have you here with us in this session. Magdalena Koning is a key member of AIQ's executive leadership team. As the general counsel at AIQ, he is responsible for oversight of the legal governance and compliance department, including business structure and operations. She is a part of the team that brought AIQ into fruition, drawing up her vast international experience as an advisor to public and private organizations. Madalena specializes in legal framework of IT integration and implementation strategies IT and business processing, outsourcing cloud services, data management, licensing and support agreements. She holds a postgraduate degree in law and was accepted as a member of the Law Society of England and Wales in September 2021 upon completion of her training as Sue Smith LLP, where she was a member of the commercial technology and outsourcing team specializing in ICT and outsourcing projects. Thank you, Ms. Madalena, for joining us. We are happy to have you in this session. Our third mentor for today is Mr. Ridwan Badmos. Ridwan Badmos is a tech lawyer, multidisciplinary private professional, and CTO. His specialties expand across various specialized technology law domains encompassing artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, and other computing edge technologies. Being a certified information privacy technologist with the IAPP and an esteemed One Trust Fellow of Privacy Technology, Ridwan is at the forefront of translating privacy regulation into functional application that handles users' data, a significant void he diligently fills. Furthermore, his unique position in working across numerous complex projects bridges the gap between legal and technical teams. He thereby harmonizing two distinct domains in this expansive technology landscape. Ridwan adores for the effective implementation of privacy and security best practice is evident in his active involvement in shaping industry standards set forth by eminent organizations such as the National Institute of Standards and Technologies (NIST) and the Cloud Security Alliance (CSA) and the Center of Internet Security (CSI). Thank you so much, Mr. Ridwan, for for joining in. We are happy to have you in today's session. To not waste any further time, and then just going straight to the business of the day, we'll be giving the floor to our mentors to just give us a brief 20-minute presentation on the subject matter for today. We'll be starting with Ms. Madalena. Right. Please, Ma, the floor is yours for your 20-minute presentation into today's topic, AI ethics and governance and the EU Act. You're welcome, Ma.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. Well, that's this is how things go, isn't it? This is completely new to me, that I'll be giving a 20-minute presentation. So, brilliant. I hope everyone can hear me, but just to give a bit of flavor. So I work in industry, so I have a very kind of practical context in terms of how we can look at AI ethics, AI governance. The business I work for develops and deploys artificial intelligence solutions for the energy and oil and gas sector. So we're a joint venture between two entities. One is, so it's the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. So we take data, subject matter experts from ADNOC, and then from our other partner, which is Presight, which is a Group 42 company, which is an infrastructure and cloud computing business. We take data scientists, software engineers, and supercomputing capacity. So we develop our own in-house IP. So if we look at ethics and governance, we're in a really good position to do what the EU has kind of coined in relation to data. And I think it's really useful to utilize in the light of the EU AI Act, and also in relation to AI development, is AI ethics by design, which, like I say, is kind of a development on data privacy or privacy by design. So we like to instill the ethical considerations of transparency, accountability, looking at mitigating bias throughout the entire life cycle of the development and then deployment of our AI solutions. So what does that look like in terms of practice? So obviously I've mentioned a few points there in terms of, when we talk about AI ethics, when we talk about AI governance, what are the key principles or key things that we want to mitigate against? Like I mentioned, we want to develop responsible artificial intelligence, AI for good, that's going to be making informed decisions based on, ethical and non-biased information. So we have implemented and have in place ethical AI policy and ethical AI procedures, which we have trained our staff on and are instilled across the entire life cycle of the AI development space. We don't at the moment operate in the EU. We're based in the United Arab Emirates, and we're based in Abu Dhabi. In the light of the regulatory landscape and governance in terms of what governments are doing, the UAE has taken a really interesting approach. So the UAE was actually the first country to ever create an AI ministry, and they created the first world ever AI minister back in 2007. And it's really interesting when you look at interviews with our AI minister, because in 2017, everyone laughed. Everyone thought, who is this? What is this, youngster? What is an AI minister? That's absolutely crazy. What can you tell me? And now you have governments and regulators around the world looking to do exactly the same, develop AI ministries, have AI. But they've taken a very, what I would call, soft law approach to AI governance. And so for a country that's looking to really propel itself into becoming an AI hub, it's been really beneficial for AI developers. So what that means is that the country has an AI strategy with various principles, and it has issued various kind of voluntary, what I would say, charters. It very recently, actually, I think it was in June or July, issued an AI ethics charter, which is a voluntary set of principles by which it encourages developers and artificial intelligence developers in the UAE to comply with. So I mentioned this is a kind of a soft law approach. It's a principles approach. So if you don't do it, you won't be fined. So it's a very different approach to that taken by the EU and the EU AI Act. Obviously, as part of this session, I think we're going to potentially touch on the EU AI Act because it is such an interesting movement globally, and it's really yet to be seen as to whether we will see what happened in the data landscape where you have what's called the Brussels effect, whereby the regulation and the government structures from coming out of the EU are really assimilated and then kind of copied to some extent around the globe. And we've actually seen that in relation to data in the UAE. So we have what are called free zones, and some of those have completely adopted the data protection regulations in the EU approach. So it'll be interesting to see whether there will be a flow down of the EU AI Act. I think criticism of the act at the moment and really the discussion globally, the way I see it, is that won't necessarily happen, at least not immediately. We're seeing such a disparity of views and approaches. And I don't know if anyone saw that UNESCO earlier this month produced a report on the different AI regulatory principles that we're seeing across the globe. But I mean, there's 9 different principles just identified in that particular report, which I thought was really interesting. The approaches taken by America, China, and the EU are going to be really, really critical. And I do often think, or I do wonder, how applicable those approaches will be to the cleaned countries in what we know as the global south, because a lot of the principles that apply to what I'll call the AI superpower countries aren't necessarily appropriate for countries in developing countries in the global south, where you have such a gap in digital literacy and digital access. So that's a kind of a whistle-stop tour in terms of some of my thinking around what's happening globally, what's happening in the UAE, and what we do at AIQ in terms of AI ethics and governance. I don't think I've taken up the 20 minutes, but I wonder if anyone had any specific questions that they wanted to raise with me on any of the points I've mentioned, or AI ethics, governance, my role, or the UAE, or the EU AI Act in general.
Thank you very much, Ma, for that brief layout into the topic of the day. I think basically we'll be taking questions towards the end. We have a segment separate for that, so we'll be taking questions a little bit later. So we would like to hear from our second mentor who is on the call, Mr. Ridwan Badmos. So sir, the floor is yours. You can take the floor and just give us your 20 minutes introduction into the topic. Mr. Ridwan, are you still with us?
No. Like this now.
All right. In the absence of Mr. Ridwan, he seems to, for some reason, not be on the call anymore. So I'm sure he'll be joining us shortly. So we'll just be taking our presentation quickly. So do we have our group presenters present here with us on call? Group presenters, group 1 and group 2, please, you can start your presentation. Okay, do we have our presenters? Please kindly unmute yourself if you are the presenter for group 1 so that we can take presentation. Okay, can we have group two? Group one, if group one is not ready, can we have group two?
Group one is ready. I'm sorry.
All right, please go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay. I would like to screen share, but I'm not able to because someone else is screen sharing.
What's this?
All right, you can go ahead and start.
Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Please hold on. I don't know. I'm coming, please. Oh. How about now? Hello?
Yes, we can see your screen, but your presentation is not up yet.
I'm about to. It's loading. Can you see it now? Hello?
Yes, we can see. We can. Okay, it's gone down.
How about now?
Yes.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Fakorodi Titilayo. I'm the presenter for Group 1, and the topic assigned to us is AI governance, regulation, ethics, and the European Union ACT. So we'll be brushing through the current state of AI in Africa, the need for AI governance and regulations, AI governance and regulatory frameworks in Africa, the challenges and opportunities in implementing AI governance and regulations in Africa. Then we also brush through some case studies as well. So moving on, for our introduction, the rampancy of the utilization of AI technologies and systems has called for some form of governance to regulate its usage and mitigate the occurrence of wrongful use of these technologies. So basically, it is talking about how rampant AI technology has evolved and how it is so much in existence that there are certain people or individuals that are making wrong use of the development. A typical example is voice phishing, where people use fake voice to carry out fraudulent acts. So AI governance encompasses the rules, practices, and frameworks that ensure the ethical and responsible use of technologies. It is simply restricting people or the users of AI to make do with it for relevant things and not to hurt other people or to cause damage to the society. It is essential in Africa as it would ensure the alignment of AI development with societal values and addressing unique challenges such as bias and privacy. So this presentation is going to cover the current state of AI in Africa, the reason why we need the governance, the existing framework in place, and also the regulatory areas and challenges. So for the current state of AI in Africa, we have countries in Africa have recognized and acknowledged the potential of artificial intelligence for national transformation. Artificial intelligence is now utilized across different sectors in African countries such as healthcare, finance, agriculture, transportation, and the likes. So we have AI in predictive healthcare, financial services automation, and agricultural yield optimization. The use and utilization of AI has promised and is promising economic growth and innovation potential. The existence of AI has brought about obvious transformation, positive transformation, and actually there is nothing that is good that would also not have its downside. So we have some challenges such as infrastructure deficits, skill gaps, and regulatory uncertainties. But before we move on to explain that, I would like to brush through the need for AI governance and regulations. Firstly, we have data privacy and protection. We need AI in order to protect our data. And as we know that there are large organizations that would not be able to individually protect their customers' data and information. So with the use of AI, would be able to there will be a way, the AI has provided a way for these things to be done, to be able to protect thousands and multiples of customers' data on the organization system. So that's that about data privacy and protection. Then we have ethical AI development. This is to encourage transparency, accountability, and fairness in AI decision making. This is trying to talk about how there are certain cases where we would need the intervention of AI know-how to be able to come about a fair decision making. Then to also mitigate bias and discrimination, artificial intelligence has made it possible to address potential AI-driven biases and discrimination. There are times that individuals or certain individuals might not be satisfied with individual-based decision. So with the intervention of AI, it is just to prove that this is, after all, this is not an individual. This is just like an invention that's come about to make a fair decision making, and also to prevent or reduce the chances of people saying that there's discrimination, and also to encourage responsible AI innovation. The need for AI governance has brought about the need to support research and development that aligns with AI values and priorities. So the next on the table of contents is AI governance and regulatory framework in Africa. Are we with me, please? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. We have AI governance and regulatory framework in Africa. South Africa's AI strategy 2019 has outlined guidelines for AI development, deployment, and use. Then we have Egypt's AI strategy as well, 2020. This AI strategy basically focused on AI adoption, research, and innovation. Then we have Nigeria's National Digital Economy Policy 2019, which addressed AI governance, data protection, and digital literacy. Also, we have Rwanda's AI and Data Regulation 2020, which focused on AI ethics, data protection, and innovation. We also have Africa's AI Policy Framework 2020 by ITU. It provided guidelines for African countries to develop AI governance framework. Then we also have Smart Africa's AI Manifesto 2020, which encouraged responsible AI adoption and innovation across Africa as a whole. Then we have the African Union's Digital Transformation Strategy of 2020, which addressed AI governance, digital skills, and innovation. Then we also have Resolution 473, which instructs state parties to ensure the development of emerging technologies compatible with the rights in African Charter. Moving on, we have challenges and opportunities that has occurred in the implementation of AI governance and regulations in Africa. Like I said, for every good thing, there's also a downside for it. So these are the challenges that the country or countries that have adopted AI has come about in the implementation of AI governance. Challenges are limited expertise and capacity, which talks about insufficient AI knowledge and skills among policymakers and regulators. Then we also have inadequate infrastructure, which talked about limited digital infrastructure, internet access, and data storage capacity. The existence of this has hindered the implementation of AI. Then funding and resources. Shortage of sufficient resources for AI governance initiative is also a possible challenge when trying to implement AI. For its opportunities, talks about economic growth and development. This is more about harnessing artificial intelligence has brought about innovation, productivity, and job creation. Then it has also helped to address social challenges, as applying AI can help tackle pressing issues like healthcare, education, and climate change. This is actually very evident and more obvious. Enhanced transparency and accountability. Using artificial intelligence has helped to increase government transparency and accountability. So we have a case study of African regulation for AI governance in 2 countries. We came about a case study for 2 countries. We have the one of South Africa and Kenya. I'm starting with Kenya. So Kenya has 2 regulatory frameworks in place: a data protection law, and task force. For the Data Protection Act 2019, it established a robust data protection regime, which is crucial for AI development. While for the AI Task Force of 2020, it was set up to explore AI's potential challenges and regulatory needs. We also have AI Strategy and Policy 2022. This has outlined for AI adoption, development, and governance in Kenya. Then it also talked about collaboration with stakeholders. Kenya has engaged industry, academics, and civil society to ensure inclusive AI governance. Then speaking of capacity building, in Kenya, they've been able to train policymakers, regulators, and law enforcement on AI and its implications. Then moving on to South Africa. In order for South Africa to ensure efficient and effective AI governance, the country developed a systematic implementation plan, among other efforts. The following are the measures taken or strategies taken to ensure an effective and efficient AI governance in South Africa. We have National AI Strategy 2019. This outlined South Africa's AI vision, goals, and objectives to become a leading AI nation in order to drive economic growth, social development, and innovation. We also have AI Institute of South Africa 2019. This was established to promote AI research, development, and innovation as well. Then we have Data Science for Impact Research Institute 2020. This focused on AI application for social and economic impact. They harnessed AI and data science for social and economic impact. For AI Governance Framework 2020, this developed guidelines for AI development, deployment, and use. The guidelines in particular are transparency, accountability, fairness, privacy, and security. Then we also have collaboration with international partners. In South Africa, they engaged with global AI governance initiatives and research institutions like OECD AI Principles and UNESCO AI Ethics. In conclusion, AI is essentially required due to the rampant utilization of AI technology. The use of AI technology comes with risk. While AI governance through regulation mitigates this risk and ensures the enjoyment of the benefits that comes with the utilization of AI, the effective implementation of this regulatory framework for AI governance is required. And for effective implementation, some notable strategies from African countries like Kenya and South Africa can be emulated. Strategies they adopted, such as establishing a task force to ensure compliance to regulatory framework, collaboration with international partners, training stakeholders in the country on AI and its implications, among others. On this note, I am done with my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Layo, right, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation from your end. So in class today, we are supposed to have 3 mentors. So we only have one of them with us. The other 2 had particular emergencies that they had to attend to. For irrespective, we'll be taking presentations from the next group, and then we'll be taking the presentation of the next group, and then we'll still want to hear from Miss Madalena, so that we can just get further insights as to the subject matters, and then we'll go straight to the question and answer segment of this particular class. The class, I hope the class will not be very long, so please, group 2, if you are ready, kindly, the group presenter can kindly unmute and start the presentation on behalf of the group.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, thank you very much. Do you have your screen set?
Yeah, I'm about to do that. Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oduwole Oluwatobiloba, and I'm Group 2's presenter, here to present our topic, which is AI ethics, the AI Act, and the European regulation, citing 2 cases that address the topic. So AI, everyone knows what artificial intelligence is all about. We know how it benefits the society and how it makes things easier for us. But with every good, there is a bad. And this is what this AI ethic and the AI Acts are trying to touch. They're trying to prevent these bad things from happening. So ethics are the principles that guide the behavior of people. We're trying to relate this to AI and trying to see how can the AI developers be in line with these set standards and regulations. So let me start here with the definition. So AI ethics refer to the principles and values that guide the development, deployment, and use of artificial intelligence systems. Then the AI Act. This AI Act refers to the policies, regulations, and practices that ensure AI systems are transparent, explainable, and accountable for their actions and decisions. Look at how I laid emphasis to that: transparent, explainable, and accountable. These are some of the pillars that are involved in AI ethics. We're going to touch the other pillars when we get more into this presentation. So next up, the significance of AI ethics and Act. So why do we need this? What is the purpose? What is the reason for AI ethics and the Act? So the main reason for this is because they're trying to respect the fundamental human rights and also trying to be in line with the set societal values. So some of the other reasons are preventing harm and bias, building trust and transparency, promoting fairness and inclusivity, encouraging responsible innovation, and protecting privacy and security. So let me go back to those pillars, as I said: accountability, transparency, and explainable. So let's add more to it now. So they said protecting privacy and security, data protection, data privacy. This is very important because AI have a lot of data collected on us humans. They have a lot of our personal information inside of the artificial intelligence systems. And if it gets in the wrong hands, it can be a very bad thing because they can use it to do so many things. So let's now also add promoting fairness and inclusivity. So now, let me give this type of example. When you know that, okay, like in a employment setting, they're trying to choose the best man for the job, and instead of using like human knowledge, they're trying to use AI to make decisions for them. So when people know that, okay, the artificial intelligence have the person that made it, the developers have more than one person involved. So people from different, let's say, cultures or race, and they have different ideas about things, and it's not just one person's personal idiosyncrasies. We will know that, okay, a lot of people were involved in this thing. So there will not be the likeliness of any bias involved in those type of decisions. So now I've mentioned 5 pillars. So that's accountability, transparency, explainable, data privacy, and fairness or inclusivity. So next up is the European regulations on AI. I hope everyone can still see my screen. So the European regulations on AI, that's the EU, European Union. Countries like France, Germany, Italy, England, all these countries. This slide is basically talking about how do the AI developers, how can they create these artificial intelligence systems that will be in line with European values and the fundamental human rights? So the regulation or the law that guides this European Union is the Artificial Intelligence Act. And the key aspect of this act is, I'm going to explain some of the few points because some of them relate to each other. So the first one is the risk-based approach. So this one is just talking about how much do these artificial intelligence systems need to be manned. What do I mean by manned? I mean, how much of human intervention will be involved in it. So they broke it down to 4 risk levels. That is unacceptable, high, limited, and minimal. So let me start with the unacceptable. These ones now are outrightly wrong. They should not be used ever. They are forbidden. They cannot be used at all. Then the next one, high. For these ones, they need a high level of human intervention, a high level of it to be manned. So I'm going to give an example of, okay, last week we talked about AI and security. So let's say in a war setting, a war machine, a land war machine that they use it to get the enemy. This type of thing now is that somebody needs to be using it, to be in control of it. So something like friendly fire wouldn't happen. They will know the right target and they will know the right person that they are targeting. Because this type of thing, if they get the wrong person, well, that is going to be a very bad thing. Then limited risk. This one now needs just it still needs human intervention, but not so much, because they have tested it, and they trust that, okay, it's going to do the job, and they won't really need much intervention involved. And then minimal, it needs next to little amount of human intervention involved in it. And next up, the prohibited practices. So AI systems that manipulate human behavior or exploit vulnerabilities and use real-time biometric surveillances, they're not seen as, they should not be used at all. So next up, I'll go to the transparency and explainability. I've gone into that, I've given examples that say that we need to know that these AI systems were made in a way that, okay, we will know that this is how it is, and we will not be able to trust that we can put our information, our personal information in there, and know that nothing wrong will happen. And then last off is enforcement and fines. So with every law, there's going to be a punishment for it. So if these AI developers go against these laws, they will get punished and pay fines for it. So next up is our case study. So we have 2 case studies. The first one is the Mark Shrem case against Facebook. This case was basically talking about when the EU were trying to transfer personal data to the US. Under the standard, the data was being protected, was not to say, they're trying to tell that you use stronger AI ethics and data protection standards for it to not get into the wrong hands, for it not to be easily hacked and just be open to the world. So this is relevant to this AI ethics and regulations in the sense that, like we said, the pillars for AI ethics is data privacy. So we need to make sure that these AI developers do things up to standards, and they're not just doing a lazy job and making our data to be easily accessed to the public or anybody that has any expertise in hacking or just getting this type of information and using it for bad things. So the next case is the Italian Data Protection Authority versus chatbot developer. So I'm going to just shorten it to Italian DPA. So the Italian DPA fined the chatbot developer for violating the European Union's general data protection regulations by using AI to process personal data without transparency and consent. This goes against the ethics, without transparency and consent. So this case is just trying to emphasize that the importance of transparency, accountability, and human oversight is needed in the AI decision-making processes. And this is how it's relevant to the AI ethics, because they're just trying to say that in everything that you're doing, just make sure that it's in line with the regulations, and that is transparency, accountability, explainable, data privacy, and I can't remember the last one right now. Sorry. So, what are the future implications for AI development and deployment? So, increased automation will free humans from complex tasks. AI-driven insights will enhance decision-making in various fields. AI-powered chatbots will improve customer experiences. Job market shifts will require workers to adapt and acquire new skills. Ethical concerns like accountability and fairness will grow, and AI will accelerate scientific breakthroughs in medicine, climate science, and more. So in conclusion, the AI Act aims to create a unified European Union approach to AI regulation, promoting trust, innovation, and human-centered AI development. These regulations aim to promote trustworthy AI, ensuring it serves human needs while respecting European values and fundamental rights. And then by prioritizing AI ethics and acts, it harnesses the power of AI to drive positive change and improve lives while minimizing its risk and negative consequences. So thank you very much for listening. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Tobilola, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you to the two groups. You did so well in capturing all the points on your slides and giving proper explanation to them. So we want to congratulate the groups for a job well done and for the efforts they put into the presentation. Well done to both groups. So right about now, Ms. Madalena, so normally during the course of the week, we give, ahead of each session, we give the opportunities for our mentees to do a background research on the topic to ensure that they have a little perspective into the topic that will be discussed during the session. And with that, they make presentations ahead of the class. And I'm sure, Ma, you've been able to hear the presentations from both groups and how well they put it together. So we just want to hear from you based off of your insights into the subject matter. If you have anything to further say about this topic, and if you have anything you would like to let the group know to better just help their knowledge gap as it pertains to AI ethics and governance.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to echo the thanks to the both groups for preparing. There's also been a lot of work that's gone into those presentations, and I appreciate the presenters as well. It's not an easy task presenting, so really appreciate all the efforts that have gone into those presentations. Both were very informative, very useful, and you covered a lot of very complicated, detailed topics in very succinct ways, which was really, really positive. I think one of the key points I'd like to make, just in terms of presenting generally, is what I find a really good way to present is to really tell a story and to present a narrative. So you want to have a clear beginning, middle, and end. You know, you want to present an agenda. This is what I'm going to be talking about. You then want to go through that agenda and explain it in a very leads A, B, C, D. So you know, reads like a story, and then have a clear conclusion whereby you're wrapping it up. And I think to an extent both groups did that, but I think there can definitely be further clarity in terms of creating that narrative and that flow between one slide to the next slide to the next slide. And this is how this relates to this, and this is how this relates to the next piece, blah, 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 if that makes sense. I think one of the parts I really liked about the first presentation is all of the references and the case study points that were made. I think the distinction that would be really useful is that the way I see it, when you're looking at ethics and governance, there's a real difference between having a strategy and having guidelines or a piece of regulation, you know, because to me, a strategy is like it's a mission, it's a vision, it's what we want to do. So to an extent, a strategy is as a kind of, well, this would be lovely, but it's not the reality on the ground. So I think it would actually be useful, because some of the strategies and the things you're talking about were actually, drafted 2019, 2020, so that's 4 years ago. So what are the examples of, okay, well, how have they implemented that? How have they done what they said they were going to do? So it'd be really useful to have some more specific examples of, okay, South Africa has the AI strategy 2019, but how have they implemented that in the last 5 years? What have they done? Is there an example, or what type of companies are doing what, I think going deeper into specific examples and the practicalities, we can make, the case studies, really kind of touch base with your audience a lot better. So, for example, the AI task force in Kenya, what exactly have they done since establishment? What have they implemented or not? I mean, it might be the case that actually, that you were rightly mentioning opportunities and challenges, to say that actually, it's going to take a long time in certain countries for these initiatives to come to fruition because X, Y, Z. And you can give statistics and figures. I think that was something that across both presentations, and maybe presentation 2 did this slightly better because you gave some specific examples, is when you're making a point, it is really useful to say, well, in South Africa on the 1st of January, XYZ company did XYZ, and you give a specific example as to why you're making the point, and it really drums home why you're saying what you're saying. So for example, you're talking about inadequate infrastructure. What does that look like? What does that mean? There are only one data set. There's only one data center in Kenya, or what does it look like to compared to developed countries? Do you know what I mean? So it gives that context in terms of why something is a challenge and why it isn't. Moving then on to just to touch briefly on presentation 2, really liked a lot of the detail in terms of the explaining the ethical pillars. That was really helpful, and the explanation of the EU AI Act, that was really helpful as well. I saw the link in the case studies to obviously the pillar of privacy. I think my overarching take is that privacy and privacy regulation and governance is a distinct topic separate from AI governance and AI regulation. You're right, it is definitely a pillar, but I see it as being quite distinct. So I wonder whether there are more specific AI related case studies that would be more suitable to the point that you're trying to make. And I think, again, the point in terms of examples would be really, really helpful. You're obviously talking about certain technologies that make decisions in employment settings. Well, give some examples. For example, Amazon, they were found to be utilizing an employment system in their HR system, which was discriminatory, or found to be discriminatory. There are lots of now cases or examples of where these systems have been used and found to have unethical implications. And you can give those examples, which really shows you, okay, well, this impacted XYZ people. Another example is in America, there was a system used in the in a healthcare scenario whereby it discriminated against certain races for certain life example, and it hits home with people as to why this is so important. If there's a system making a decision about why or how I get an organ, I want it to be trained on as much data and quality data and unbiased data as possible. I think a point also that could be looked at is liability. So when you're talking about AI ethics, who's going to be responsible for decisions that are made by these AI systems? That was something that could have been brought out a little bit as well. So that's in a nutshell. I know I've whistled through some comments there, but a lot of really, really useful and accurate content and thought-provoking content in both presentations. I think that enhancing just with some really useful examples or real life examples, because there now are lots. Fortunately and unfortunately, would also be helpful. I think a point that I could make from my own experience is that the sector I work in is obviously AI development in energy. And something that's really interesting is the adoption of artificial intelligence across different sectors. And you generally find that there's a higher adoption rate or a faster adoption rate of AI systems where you have a lower cost to entry and there is a lower risk to potential human life. So, for example, you'll see that a lot of adoption in across the globe has been in the likes of marketing and advertising. You'll be hard pressed to find a company that isn't using ChatGPT or Copilot at the moment for putting that type of material together. However, contrast that to the healthcare industry or the oil and gas industry, where actually if AI systems make mistakes, then there is a real cost to human life. The adoption rate has been a lot slower, and the research in those areas has taken a lot more time. And again, something that you could look at in terms of regulation is the different approaches that have been taken across the globe in terms of how you look at either different sectors or different risk appetites. So again, on the EU AI Act, you mentioned that obviously this is a risk-based approach, but not every country is taking the risk-based approach. The UK, for example, is looking at how whether they take an industry-specific approach. Some countries are looking at actually we don't need a specific AI regulation because you already have, for example, anti-discrimination regulations. You already have data regulations. You already have anti-competitive regulations. So you don't need something specific for AI because all the other existing regulations you have in place cover these systems already. Or maybe they're taking that position at the moment, but will, stand back, look and see how the EU AI Act is implemented, and then implement, cherry pick the best parts or what has or hasn't worked for their own potential benefit in the future. So that's kind of my 2 cents. Again, a whistle stop tour is probably a lot, and I hope there's some questions I can hopefully answer or add some flavor to.
All right, thank you, Ms. Magdalena, for that very interesting discourse and highlights that you gave to the presentation. I'm sure the mentees or the students rather were able to listen, pay attention to some of the things you pointed out, very specific things you pointed out, and some of the examples you cited as to areas where these bias exist and how different countries are addressing them. So we'll be going straight to the question and answer segment of this particular session. We would be taking live questions from our mentees. I'm trying to look through the questions that were sent. But before we go through that, please, can we have live questions from our mentees? Is there anyone who needs further clarification? If there's anything that you would like for our mentor to point out, so please, you can kindly indicate by the raise of hand, or you can send your questions to the chat box.
Be nice, guys.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so please, do we have questions from anyone?
Just to add that there are no silly questions. There are no stupid questions. So even if you think, oh, I don't want to ask this, ask it. We can just have a discussion, have a conversation. Anything goes from my side. Anyway.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma, for pointing that out. So please feel free to ask any particular question that you may have. Do well to ensure that you ask questions. This is how we get the best from our mentors. So please, if you have any question, any place you may need some form of clarity, please do well to ask your questions. But while we are waiting for our our mentors, our mentees rather, to ask questions. I think I have a question of my own. And the question I have, Ma, for you is currently majority of the countries across the world, as much as they are developing their own laws and acts in respect to to artificial intelligence and the ethical implications of using AI. What makes the European Union Act a standout from other laws that are currently on ground? What necessarily is the standout variance from other acts that we have across different countries and continents?
Yeah, so I think the approach it's taken, so the risk-based approach is really the key kind of takeaway. So the only other countries at the moment that you have this kind of what I would call hard law regulation, so where you've got enacted regulations, is China. And their laws are less concentrated in terms of different technologies risks, but it's more looking at, for example, they have a algorithm bias law, for example, and they have a law that looks specifically at generative AI. So it doesn't look at the technology, or it doesn't have the same style approach in terms of what they're doing in China versus the EU. You also have a different approach again taken by America. So America at federal level, you don't have a regulatory regime put in place. You know, Joe Biden gave his executive order last year, but that wasn't a law per se. It was just kind of a call to action. You have different states. I think it's over 100 different bills in various different states at the moment being discussed. And one of the critical ones at the moment is one in California, which is, quite, shall I say, controversial because of the location, or because of Silicon Valley's location and the proposals taken under that particular law. I'd say again, the key point for the EU AI Act as well is the level of the fines. So again, they've taken the same type of approach that they did with the GDPR, in that it's a percentage of global turnover, and the fines are, really big numbers potentially. If you look at other jurisdictions which are even looking at regulation, talking about regulation, and even, for example, China, like I just mentioned, the fines aren't the same level. It's not the same type of conversation. So reaching the regulations doesn't have the same implication for a business or a global business. I would also say, again, the new AI Act has this extraterritorial impact. So again, it looks at those companies or AI developers or sellers that aren't necessarily based or located in the EU. It's looking at if the systems are targeting or being sold or being used by EU data subjects or EU subjects, if that makes sense. So, for example, if my company I work for based in the UAE sells, or the system is utilized by people residing in the EU, then the EU AI Act could well apply. So that's another key implication, or a key thing that's critical for the EU's approach.
All right, thank you very much, Ma, for helping to answer that question. We have a question on the chat box, and the question is from Daniel Bello. He's asking, can I get a clarification on how bias in AI algorithm can be identified and mitigated to ensure fairness?
Yeah, so in terms of identifying a bias, that's really challenging, and you'd have to look at testing your program. But in terms of mitigating bias in an algorithm in general, The key to doing that is ensuring that the data that your AI is trained on is two things. One, you have as much data as possible, and two, that data is of the highest quality possible. So the more data that you have, the higher quality data that you have, the less potential bias, and so the fairer your output will be. Generally, in the industry, you have the phrase rubbish in, rubbish out. So if you're training your algorithm and your system on, two data sets and they're, a pile of rubbish, or they're not in a labeled or a very useful format, then the system that you're going to be developing isn't going to be very reliable and potentially unfair. I mean, the things that we're looking at when we talk about, for example, AI algorithms used in employment, the difficulty is the historic data that you use. So, for example, for Amazon, the example I gave earlier, basically, Amazon is a technology business. So they were utilizing a system to recruit based on, which was trained on data from the technology sector. So if you look at senior individuals in the technology sector over the last 50 years, they are all men. So you're training an algorithm based on data that is highly favorable towards the history of that particular industry, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that will create a fair result. So that's why you need additionally checks and balances, and also a potential human intervention. So I would say that in a lot of instances where you're utilizing AI in certain circumstances, there has to be an element of human oversight still. You can't just fully rely on a system to do 100% of a role. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yes, Ma, I'm sure it does. Thank you very much, Ma. So we still have more questions coming in. So I'll start with a general question that was sent by Group 2 while they were making their presentation. And the question here is, can this regulation, and that is the EU Act, can it be applied to other countries?
When you say applied to other countries, is the question, could another country take the regulation and implement it themselves? So, for example, let's take an African country. Could Nigeria take the EU AI Act and create the Nigerian AI Act? Yes, they could, absolutely. Or if the question is, does the EU AI Act apply to companies based in other countries? I think I covered that earlier when I was saying that, yes, if a company, for example, again, I'll use an African country based in Kenya, is selling, or their users are in the EU, then that company could potentially be subject to the EU AI.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. We have 3 more questions from Uogbi Daniel. Sorry if I didn't pronounce your name very well. The questions here are, first, what are the core ethical principles that should guide the development of AI?
I'm interested who asked that question, because if they were listening to presentation 2, I think who's the presenter of presentation 2? He did a fantastic job of talking about the guiding pillars for or the ethical principles that should be guiding AI development. It's inclusivity and fairness, it's accountability, transparency, explainability, protecting security and privacy. So the presentation 2, did a great job of looking at these.
Yes, Ma. I can remember the Group 2 presenter highlighting that in the presentation. We'll kindly ask Mr. Daniel to kindly refer back to the presentation made by the group presenter. This particular class is being live streamed to YouTube, so you can always revisit this session and whatever you missed out, you can always get that information when you revisit the class. So the second question is, how can we ensure that AI systems are transparent and explainable to users?
Yeah, so I think the onus here is on collaboration between developers and users. So for example, if you're developing a specific use case, so when we work with our customers, we work very collaboratively, talking about, okay, well, this is the data we need, this is why we need it, this is how we're going to use it, this is how the algorithm is going to be trained, and then the output is going to be XYZ based on XYZ. So the key is really developing systems that don't have this kind of black box, where you just put something in and then something else comes out. There needs to be, or developers need to be able to give rationales for how the input creates the output. And you can look at, talking about how the algorithms do that, documenting the data used for training, disclosing the algorithm's architecture and the relevant parameters, explaining the models used, the predictions, classifications, and so that type of thing.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. And the very last question we'll be taking for this particular session is, what role should government play in regulating AI?
Well, I think that's a really, really good question, because I think around the globe at the moment, you're seeing different governments taking really different approaches as to how much or how much of a role they play or don't play. So obviously there's a global conversation and governments are definitely engaging in that conversation. But to what extent they regulate is still yet to be seen. So I was mentioning earlier, do you have a hard law approach? So do you have a enshrined codified regulation like the AI Act? Or do you have a soft law approach, for example? Do you have best practices and guidelines and kind of these more kind of softer suggestions for good practice? So my view is that you need a mixture of the two. That's my personal perspective, because I think that if you have all these nice to haves, you have, for example, last year you had a lot of all the big US tech companies doing a deal with the White House to basically say that they would honor certain ethical principles. But are they? Who's policing that? How do we know? And in any event, like if a technology company like OpenAI, if they're just left to self-audit and report, of course they're going to say that they have complied with the requirements stipulated. So I think it's very, very difficult to say that we should leave I think that governments shouldn't necessarily have a complete 100% soft law approach. I think there is a need for regulating, in particular, again, this is just my personal view, in relation to use cases and technology that can do the biggest harm for individuals and for society at large. So for example, if we're going back to the EU AI Act, those banned AI uses, so using, biometrics or real-time biometric identification systems in public spaces, things like that have a really questionable societal position, I think need to be looked at by governments in maybe a lot more detail and with a lot more scrutiny than should I use ChatGPT for creating some marketing content.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. Sorry, just to take one last question, because someone sent a private message to me instead of directly to the group. But just to take one last question, Ma. The question here from Peculiar is the AI Act comprehensive enough to cover ethical concerns that may arise in the future, considering the fact that AI systems are developing and evolving every day?
That is a great question. I love that question. I think one of the key criticisms actually of the EU in their development of the Act is that they have, one, over-regulated, and two, they've regulated too. I mean, they will definitely, and it's a great achievement that they have been able to bring such a comprehensive piece of regulation, spanning so many different stakeholders together in the last kind of couple of years. But you're completely right. The time frame of which they've even had the discussions over the regulation, the landscape of AI and the technology in AI has completely shifted and completely changed. And if you look at how certain publicly available technologies have developed because of the ability and the availability of compute or computing power, and when I say that, like infrastructure and capacity for these systems to be trained and developed, it's just moving way too fast for regulators to keep up. So personally, again, this is just my personal view. I feel as though the EU AI Act will very quickly be tested, and very quickly we will see that the technology and the technologists move too fast. Or not too fast. I don't want to say too fast, because I work in this space and I think it's fantastic and it's exciting. And it's really, really difficult to say that we should put guardrails on this type of technology, because you don't want to stifle innovation. Just that answer the question, I've meandered a little bit. I think that yes, the EU AI Act does cover a lot of the ethical pillars and ethical questions that are raised by AI. Do I think that it will quickly be outdated? And my preference is for a more agile system that is going to be able to move quickly with the regulation and be informed by the technology that it needs to cover and regulate.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. I'm sure you were able to, for all those who were able to ask questions, I'm sure Ms. Madalena was able to give some very kind answers to your question that were understandable. So I would like to further encourage each and every single participant on this call that in later and in future classes that you ensure to ask questions. This is how we get the best out of each section. And I want to thank our mentor for taking out time to not just give us a brief into the topic for today, but also taking out our time to give an advice to our mentees on how best to go around presentations, and also taking our time to answer our questions. I think with this, okay, just before we go, I would like for us to take a quick screenshot, a quick picture. I would kindly like to request, if it's possible, for everyone on this call to turn on their videos so that we can take a quick screenshot for our social media postings to say what we've learned with the evidence that you were present in session. So please kindly turn on your videos so that we can take a quick screenshot, and then we can call it a day. All right. Thank you, Praise. Thank you, Ebumu. Sorry, Nelson. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Miss Madeline. All right. Okay, we're still doing that. You can smile for the camera. Sorry, please give me a moment.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see some faces.
All right. Thank you very much, Ma. It's nice seeing yours also. Thank you. So once again, thank you. And we've come to the end of today's session. It has been quite interactive. At least we got quite a number of questions from our mentees, and our mentor has been able to do due justice to them. I would kindly like to advise our mentees to revisit this session, as we'll be posting the link to this class to your WhatsApp group, so that you can always visit it when you can. So thank you, Ms. Magdalene. Thank you to our mentors in Essential, and I'm apologizing for their behalf. They reached out to us that they won't be available because of certain emergencies that they had to deal with. With this, like I said, we've come to the end of today's session. I look forward to seeing all participants in the next class. Please kindly ensure to give in the effort, put in the research, right? You are learning, you are improving yourself in knowledge, you are getting to know best practices, and you are getting to learn from the very, very best in terms of the mentors that we have on call. Thank you so much, Ms. Madeleine, for sparing your 1 hour plus of time to be here with us in today's session. Good day, everyone, and I wish everyone a lovely day ahead.
Angie, thank you so much for having me, guys. All the best.
All right, bye-bye. Take care.